There is a truth about success that most men never discover. Not because it is hidden, because it is uncomfortable. The truth is this: the quality of your position determines the quality of your outcomes more than the quality of your effort. Two men of equal capability, equal intelligence, equal willingness to work, will produce entirely different results if one is positioned correctly and the other is not. The man in the right position will find that opportunities arrive with a regularity that seems almost effortless, that the right people come to him, that fortune, when it moves through him rather than past him, that each success creates the conditions for the next one, compounding across time into something that looks, from the outside, like extraordinary luck. The man in the wrong position will find the opposite, that he works harder than anyone around him and advances less, that the opportunities he hears about have already closed by the time he reaches them, that fortune moves through the room but somehow never through him, that effort, however sustained, produces results that are disproportionately modest relative to what the effort deserves. The difference between these two men is not talent. It is not character. It is not even strategy in the conventional sense of the word. It is positioning. My name is Niccolò Machiavelli. I spent 14 years in the service of the Florentine Republic watching men navigate one of the most competitive environments in the known world. And I observed, with a consistency that eventually became a principle rather than an observation, that the men who rose most reliably were not always the most capable or the most diligent or even the most strategically sophisticated. They were the men who had placed themselves where the action was, where the decisions were made, where the information flowed, where the resources were concentrated and the relationships were formed that determined who got what and when. They were, in other words, positioned. Today we examine what positioning actually is, how it is built, how it is lost, and why most men never develop it because they are too focused on the quality of their effort to ever examine the quality of their position. I want to begin with the most fundamental observation about positioning that I made across my entire career. Position is not where you are. It is what flows through where you are. Most men think about their position in terms of title or status or the formal hierarchy of whatever organization or social structure they inhabit. They think about whether they are above or below someone else, whether their position is senior or junior, whether they have more or less authority than the person beside them. This is not what I mean by positioning. What I mean is this: every environment, whether it is a city, a court, a merchant house, a profession, or a social circle, has specific places through which the most important things flow. Information flows through certain people and not others. Opportunity is concentrated in certain relationships and not others. Resources, decisions, influence, all of them move through specific channels, and those channels run through specific positions. The man who occupies one of those positions is positioned. The man who does not, however high his formal title or however great his effort, is not. I observed this with particular clarity in the Florentine Chancery, where I spent 14 years as second chancellor. The formal hierarchy of Florence placed the Gonfalonier and the various councils above me in authority and status. But the actual flow of information, the dispatches that arrived from across Europe, the reports from ambassadors, the intelligence from every corner of the political landscape, all of it flowed through my office. This gave me a positioning that my formal title did not fully reflect. I knew things that men of nominally higher status did not know, because the information flowed through me rather than through them. And knowledge, in a political environment, is leverage. It is the raw material from which strategy is built and through which influence is exercised. The man who controls where information flows controls, in a real and practical sense, much of what follows from that information. That is positioning. Not a title, a location in the actual architecture of how things move. The first law of positioning is this: place yourself where the decisions are made. Every organization, every social structure, every environment in which human beings compete for resources and influence has centers of genuine decision-making. These centers are not always where the formal hierarchy says they are. Often they are somewhere else entirely, in the relationship between two people who trust each other completely, in the informal gathering that happens before the formal meeting, in the conversation that takes place after everyone else has left the room. The man who understands this and places himself in proximity to the actual centers of decision-making, rather than the nominal ones, has positioning that formal authority cannot replicate. I watched this operate throughout my career. The most powerful men in Florence were not always the men with the highest formal titles. They were the men who had cultivated the relationships through which the actual decisions were made, who were present in the conversations that mattered, who were trusted enough by the people who held formal authority that their counsel was sought and their judgment was weighted heavily in the decisions that formal authority ultimately announced. These men had genuine positioning, and their positioning gave them influence that was, in some ways, more durable than formal authority, because it did not depend on the maintenance of any particular title or the survival of any particular political arrangement. The formal position can be taken away. The positioning, built into the actual architecture of relationships and information flow, is far more difficult to dislodge. This is why I counsel any man who wishes to understand positioning to stop thinking about the organizational chart and start thinking about the actual architecture of how things move in his environment. Where does the information actually flow? Where are the decisions actually made? Where are the relationships that generate the opportunities everyone else is competing for? Place yourself there. Not through manipulation. Through genuine competence, genuine reliability, genuine usefulness to the people who occupy those positions and who therefore have it within their power to include you in the flows that run through them. Be the person they want in the room. And the room, over time, will move to wherever you are. The second law of positioning concerns information, and it is the one I consider most underestimated by men who are otherwise strategically sophisticated. The best positioned man in any environment is almost always the man who knows the most about what is actually happening. Not what the official account says is happening. What is actually happening? Who is aligned with whom and on what terms? Where the genuine tensions are beneath the diplomatic surface. What the real priorities are as distinct from the stated ones. Where the resources are actually flowing as opposed to where the reports say they are flowing. This kind of information does not arrive through formal channels. It arrives through relationships. Through the trust of people who know things and are willing to share them with someone they consider reliable and discreet. Building those relationships is the work of positioning at its most fundamental level. And it requires a specific quality that I observed in every genuinely well-positioned man I encountered across my career. Discretion. The man who is trusted with genuine information is the man who has demonstrated, across time and across situations, that what is told to him in confidence remains in confidence. That the information he receives does not travel further than the purpose for which it was shared. That he is, in the deepest sense, a safe place for the kind of honest communication that most environments make dangerous. This quality of discretion is rare, and its rarity makes it extraordinarily valuable. The man who possesses it becomes a node through which genuine information flows, because people with genuine information seek out the people they can trust with it. And the man through whom genuine information flows is positioned in a way that the man who knows only the official account is not. He sees the real landscape. He understands the actual forces at work. He can navigate with a precision that the man operating on official information cannot match. I built this positioning deliberately across my years in the Chancery. I cultivated relationships with people who knew things. I demonstrated through consistent behavior that what was shared with me served the purpose for which it was shared and nothing further. And over time, the information that flowed to me became more accurate, more significant, and more useful than what was available to men of nominally higher position who had not built the reputation for discretion that mine had become. That information advantage was positioning. And it was built not through formal authority but through the patient cultivation of trust across years of consistent behavior. The third law of positioning is perhaps the most strategically important and the most commonly misunderstood. Position yourself at the intersection of multiple worlds. In Florence, the men who accumulated the greatest influence were almost never the men who were deeply embedded in a single world. The merchant who knew only merchants. The scholar who knew only scholars. The soldier who knew only soldiers. They were the men who moved between worlds, who were trusted in the merchant community and in the scholarly community and in the political community, who could carry information and relationship and opportunity from one world to another in ways that the deeply specialized man could not. This is what I would now call network positioning. And it is one of the most powerful forms of positioning available because it is almost impossible to replicate without the years of relationship building that it requires. The man positioned at the intersection of multiple worlds holds something that each of those worlds values and cannot easily obtain for itself. He has access to the thinking, the relationships, the opportunities, and the resources of worlds that do not naturally communicate with each other. And his ability to facilitate that communication, to be the bridge through which different worlds connect, gives him an influence that no single world could confer. I was, in my years of greatest influence, positioned at exactly such an intersection. I moved between the world of practical politics, the world of military strategy, the world of classical learning, and the world of diplomatic negotiation. Each of these worlds trusted me as one of their own, and each of them gave me access to things that the others found valuable. This intersection positioning meant that I was useful to an extraordinary range of people. And usefulness, genuine usefulness that is difficult to replicate, is one of the most durable foundations of influence that I know of. Build relationships across worlds that do not naturally intersect. Be genuinely present in each of them. Develop the authentic knowledge and genuine relationships that make you a real member of each community rather than a visitor to it. And then become the bridge through which those communities connect when connection serves them. The man at the intersection is always in demand, because what he offers cannot be obtained anywhere else. The fourth law of positioning concerns timing, and it connects directly to what I have written about fortuna in other contexts. The best position in the world is worth nothing if you occupy it at the wrong moment. I observed this across my career with a frequency that was sometimes painful to witness. Men who had built genuine positioning, who were in exactly the right place in exactly the right networks with exactly the right information and relationships, lost everything because the moment shifted and they were not positioned for the new moment, only for the one that had passed. This is the deepest challenge of positioning. It is not static. The right position in one era becomes the wrong position in the next. The information flows that gave a man advantage in one political configuration become irrelevant in a new one. The relationships that were central when one set of people held power become peripheral when a different set does. The man of genuine virtue understands this and builds his positioning with adaptability in mind. He does not attach himself so completely to any single configuration of power or any single set of relationships or any single flow of information that he cannot survive the reconfiguration that fortune inevitably brings. He builds positioning that is durable across multiple configurations. He maintains relationships across different factions rather than embedding himself completely in a single one. He builds skills and knowledge that are valuable in multiple environments rather than those that are specific to a single context. He positions himself in places where information flows regardless of which political configuration is currently dominant, rather than in places where information flows only while a particular arrangement holds. This kind of adaptive positioning is harder to build than fixed positioning. It requires more relationships, more skills, more genuine presence in more worlds. But it is far more durable. And durability, in an environment where fortune shifts with a regularity that no individual can fully predict or prevent, is the quality that matters most. I learned this the hard way. My positioning in Florence was deep but not adaptive. When the political configuration changed and the Republic fell and the Medici returned, I was too completely embedded in the configuration that had ended to survive the transition with my position intact. I had positioned myself brilliantly for one arrangement and not at all for the one that replaced it. And the consequence was the exile that cost me 14 years of accumulated position in a matter of weeks. If I had built more adaptively, if I had maintained genuine relationships across the factional divide rather than embedding myself completely on one side of it, I might have survived the transition. I might have been useful to the Medici as I had been useful to the Republic. My knowledge of political and military affairs did not diminish when the government changed. My positioning did, because it was tied to the government rather than to the underlying flows of information and relationship that persisted across governments. Build positioning that outlasts the current configuration. The configurations always change. The underlying flows of information, relationship, and resource are more durable. Position yourself in those flows rather than in any particular arrangement of who currently controls them. The fifth law of positioning is the one most men resist most strongly. Position yourself before you need the position. The worst time to build positioning is when you need it. When the crisis has arrived and the opportunity has presented itself and the moment is here but the relationships are not in place, the information is not flowing to you, the reputation has not been built, and the trust has not been established. At that moment, the positioning that would allow you to navigate the situation effectively simply does not exist. And you cannot build in weeks or days what should have been built across years. I observed this pattern so many times that it eventually stopped surprising me. A merchant would face a crisis that required the support of influential relationships he had never cultivated. A political figure would need information that he had never built the network to receive. A man would face an opportunity that required resources he had never built the positioning to access. And in each case, the response was to attempt to build rapidly what should have been built patiently. To reach out to people whose trust had not been established. To ask for things from relationships that had not been maintained. To present himself as a candidate for a position for which his reputation had not been built. These attempts almost always failed. Not because the people approached were malicious, because the trust, the reputation, the established relationship that would have made the request reasonable had not been built. The man was asking to withdraw from an account he had never deposited into. And the answer was almost always the same. The account is empty. There is nothing to withdraw. The man of genuine strategic intelligence understands that positioning is built during the times when it is not immediately needed. During the periods of relative calm and stability, when there is no crisis demanding immediate navigation, when the opportunity is not yet here but the preparation for it can be laid. He builds relationships with people who are not yet powerful but who will be. He develops knowledge of domains that are not yet central but whose centrality is coming. He establishes his reputation in communities that are not yet influential but whose influence is growing. He plants in seasons of relative abundance so that the harvest is available when the scarcity comes. This requires a quality of long-horizon thinking that most men find difficult. The returns on this investment are not visible in the year they are made. They are visible in a different year, often many years later, when the crisis arrives or the opportunity presents itself and the positioning, built patiently and apparently unnecessarily across the preceding years, turns out to have been exactly what was needed. The man who did not build it has nothing to draw on. The man who did has everything he needs already in place. Build now, for the moment that has not yet arrived, because it is always arriving. I want to talk about what destroys positioning because I observed its destruction as often as I observed its construction, and the patterns of destruction were as consistent as the patterns of building. The first destroyer of positioning is visibility without security. I have written about this in other contexts, but it applies with particular force to positioning. The man who makes his positioning visible before it is fully secured invites exactly the opposition that would dismantle it. Others who would have preferred the position he occupies, who had not noticed it was occupied until he made it visible, now see clearly what they are competing with and can organize against it. Build your positioning quietly. Let it be felt before it is seen. Let the results of your positioning be visible before the positioning itself is understood. By the time anyone has understood the architecture of your position, it should already be too secure to dislodge. The second destroyer is overextension. The man who tries to position himself in too many places simultaneously ends up genuinely positioned in none of them. Positioning requires real presence, real relationship, real trust. These things cannot be manufactured at scale. They require time and attention that is finite. The man who spreads himself across too many worlds, trying to be the bridge between everything rather than the bridge between the specific things that his particular nature and capabilities make him genuinely suited to bridge, becomes a surface presence everywhere rather than a genuine presence anywhere. Surface presence does not produce positioning. It produces acquaintance. And acquaintance, when the moment comes, is worth far less than the genuine relationship that comes from sustained, real presence across a smaller number of worlds. Be present in fewer places. Be genuinely present in those. The depth of a few real positions will serve you better than the breadth of many surface ones. The third destroyer is disloyalty. Positioning is built on trust. And trust, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild to the level it had reached before the breaking. The man who uses his positioning to serve his interests at the expense of the people who trusted him with it destroys, in that single act, the reputation that the positioning was built upon. He may gain something in the immediate transaction. He will lose far more in the long-term erosion of the trust that made his positioning valuable. I observed this repeatedly. Men who had built genuine positioning through years of reliable, trustworthy behavior destroyed it in a single instance of visible self-serving that cost them the trust that had been the foundation of everything they had built. The most valuable thing your positioning gives you is access to other people's trust. Treat that trust as the most valuable asset you possess, because it is. And it is the one asset that cannot be rebuilt once destroyed. I want to close with something that I think about often when I reflect on my own positioning across my career and its ultimate failure to survive the political transition that ended the Republic. Positioning, properly built, is not about advantage over others. It is about being genuinely useful to the environment you are positioned in. The most durable positions I observed across my career were occupied by men who were positioned not because they had maneuvered themselves into a place of advantage, but because they had become genuinely indispensable to the functioning of the environment they inhabited. The man who is genuinely indispensable is not easily dislodged. Not because he has accumulated enough leverage to resist dislodgement, though that may also be true, but because the environment itself resists dislodging him. Because the people who might consider dislodging him understand that what he provides cannot easily be replaced and that the cost of losing it is greater than the benefit of removing him. This kind of positioning is built through genuine contribution, through being actually better at something important than anyone else who is readily available, through providing something to the environment that the environment genuinely needs and that it would notice the absence of. It is, in other words, positioning built on virtue rather than on maneuver, on the development of genuine capability and genuine usefulness rather than on the cultivation of strategic advantage for its own sake. The man whose positioning rests on maneuver alone is always vulnerable to a better maneuver from someone else. The man whose positioning rests on genuine indispensability is protected by the very environment he serves, because the environment has a stake in his remaining that is independent of his own power to maintain his position. I aspire to this kind of positioning. To be genuinely useful enough, genuinely capable enough, genuinely reliable enough, that the environment I inhabit would experience my removal as a genuine loss rather than merely as the displacement of one maneuvering party by another. Build that kind of position. Not the position that is held through leverage and maneuver. The position that is held because what it provides cannot be easily replaced. That position, once built, is the most durable thing available to any man in any environment. And it is built the same way everything else worth having is built. Through the patient, sustained, unglamorous work of becoming genuinely excellent at something that genuinely matters. Begin that work, and the position will follow.